Ethan and Claire had only lived in the apartment for 3 weeks when the noises began. At first it was easy to dismiss the faint humming through the floorboards, the occasional slam echoing from the basement laundry room late at night. But when Claire found her freshly washed clothes damp and streaked with reddish stains, and Ethan swore he saw a pale hand pressed against the dryer glass, they realized something was wrong. What lurked in the machines wasn't just broken wiring or bad plumbing, it was something alive, something waiting, and it was already inside their home. The laundry room in my apartment building always had a strange atmosphere, especially when I went there alone at night. During the day it looked normal, harmless even, with people chatting idly while folding their shirts or carrying baskets back upstairs. But after midnight, the place seemed to change. The basement lights were always too dim, buzzing faintly as if the electricity was tired. The walls smelled faintly of damp cement and mold, and the hum of the machines echoed endlessly, making the air feel heavier than it should. I used to avoid going there at night, but on that particular evening, I had no choice. My work clothes were piled high, and I needed them for the morning. I carried my basket down the creaky stairs, every step amplifying the uneasy silence of the building. My footsteps sounded much louder than they should have, as though the stairwell was amplifying each movement. The hallway to the laundry room stretched in front of me, the single bulb above flickering like it couldn't decide whether to die out or stay lit. I felt an odd tightness in my chest, like my body was warning me to turn back, but I pushed forward anyway. The metallic door to the laundry room was cold when I touched it, and when I pulled it open, the air that came out was stale. As if the room hadn't been entered for hours, the room was just as I remembered it. 2 rows of machines, their circular doors gaping open like mouths waiting to swallow. A single dryer rumbled quietly at the far end, spinning clothes in a slow rhythm that almost resembled breathing. I placed my basket down and began loading one of the washers, each sound the clink of coins, the slam of the lid, the splash of water echoing louder than normal. When the machine started its churn, I felt a strange sense of relief. The steady noise, though mechanical, made me feel less alone. But then, as I sat on one of the cheap plastic chairs with my phone, I noticed something strange. At the very end of the row, one of the washers was already running. I hadn't seen anyone else in the hallway, and the basement door was still locked from the inside. I stared at it, listening to the faint thud inside, the way the machine rocked back and forth. It wasn't the kind of movement that came from clothes. It was heavy, uneven, like something large shifted inside. I told myself someone must have left their laundry running late, though I'd never seen anyone foolish enough to do that here. Still, I tried to ignore it. Minutes passed, but the sound grew louder. The splashing water inside the machine became violent, echoing like waves in a tank too small to hold them. The lid trembled, and the machine scraped across the floor a little with each jolt. The noise was so loud that I could no longer concentrate on my phone. My mouth went dry. I stood, staring at the washer. The red light above its dial flickered, then dimmed until it went out. The machine stopped instantly, falling into an unnatural silence. The air was so still that I could hear my own pulse hammering in my ears. My feet moved toward it without me realizing, each step slow and hesitant. A thin trail of liquid dripped down the side, catching the pale glow of the light above. At first I thought it was just water, but as it reached the floor, the color looked wrong, dark, cloudy, with streaks of red mixed in. The coppery smell that followed made my stomach twist. I crouched slightly, watching the puddle spread wider across the cracked cement. My hands trembled as I reached for the washer's lid, my mind begging me not to, but some awful curiosity pushing me forward. Before I could lift it, the silence of the basement was broken by the dryer behind me. It thudded hard, the sound of something inside slamming against the glass door. My body stiffened. Slowly I turned my head. The circular window was fogged with heat, but I could see movement inside, something pressed against the glass from within. The room suddenly felt smaller, suffocating, like the air itself was trying to choke me. My skin prickled, my throat closing with panic. And then, just for a split second, I thought I saw it clearly. A pale face, distorted by the glass, staring back at me. I couldn't move. My entire body felt like it was carved from stone, frozen in place while my mind screamed at me to run. The dryer's drum turned slowly, groaning with effort, and the fogged glass revealed more than just clothing tumbling inside. The shape pressed harder against the window, and though the heat blurred it, I could make out features no shirt or blanket could ever form. Skin, slick with condensation. Hollowed eyes that seemed swollen, bulging out as if searching for me. A mouth half open, locked in a silent scream. My heart pounded so violently in my chest that it felt like it might burst out. I stumbled backward, my heel catching on the leg of a chair, nearly sending me crashing to the ground. The sound of the dryer seemed to swell in the room, louder and harsher, each rotation sounding like a guttural breath. I gripped the back of the chair for balance, my nails digging into the cheap plastic until it threatened to snap. I told myself I was imagining things, that the heat and the glass were creating illusions, but when the drum turned again, I saw it more clearly, the curve of a jaw, the stretch of a cheek pressed flat, the faint shadow of hair matted against the glass. I couldn't take it anymore. I darted toward the exit, my basket of clothes abandoned where it sat. But before I could reach the door, another sound stopped me. A wet, sloshing thud echoed from behind, coming from the washer that had been leaking. The lid creaked slightly, like something inside was pushing against it, desperate to get out. My breathing grew shallow. The red light above the washer flickered again, then burst back on as though the machine had been revived. The sloshing grew louder, heavier, as if the drum was no longer filled with clothes but with something far heavier, denser. A steady drip hit the floor, joining the dark puddle already spreading. I couldn't bring myself to look closer this time. The thought of running upstairs flashed in my mind, but another problem clawed its way in. My clothes. They were still soaking in the washer I had started, mid-cycle just a few feet away from that nightmare machine. It was a ridiculous thought. Why did it matter? But in that strange moment, panic and practicality fought inside me. Those clothes were all I had for work. If I left them, it meant coming back here again. The idea of returning terrified me more than staying just a few seconds longer. I forced my trembling legs to move, darting to my washer, fumbling with the dial until the lid unlocked. The sound of water draining hissed like a snake, and I yanked the lid open, scooping my dripping clothes into my arms. They clung to me with their wet weight, sticking coldly to my skin. My instincts screamed at me to drop everything and run, but I clutched the clothes tighter, pressing them to my chest, as if they could shield me. As I turned toward the exit, the dryer let out a metallic screech. My head snapped toward it, and my stomach flipped. The face was gone. The drum spun lazily now, only a few damp shirts tumbling inside. No distorted features. No lifeless eyes. For a moment, I almost convinced myself I had imagined the entire thing. Maybe it had just been fabric all along, twisted by heat and light. Maybe the stress of the night was breaking my mind into pieces. But then I saw it. A smudge on the inside of the glass. Not fog, but something darker. A greasy imprint, shaped unmistakably like a hand pressed flat against the window. The streaks ran downward, dragging as if fingers had slowly slipped away. My legs finally obeyed. I bolted for the door, clutching my clothes so hard that my arms ached. The hallway outside felt endless as I raced down it, my footsteps echoing off the narrow walls. The stairwell loomed ahead, and I nearly tripped climbing it, my vision swimming with dizziness. My ears rang with the sound of the machines, their humming chasing me upward, even though I had left them behind. When I finally burst into my apartment, I slammed the door and locked it, my lungs heaving as I dropped the wet pile of clothes onto the floor. Water seeped across the tiles, leaving streaks that looked darker than they should. I leaned against the door, trying to calm myself, telling myself that I was safe now, that whatever was in that room couldn't follow me here. But as I stood there in the silence of my apartment, I swore I could still hear the faint hum of the machines vibrating through the floorboards, steady and constant, like a heartbeat that didn't belong to me. And when I glanced at the pile of clothes I had carried back, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Mixed in with my shirts and pants was a piece of fabric I had never owned. A torn, stained scrap of cloth, heavy with water and streaked with a color that looked far too much like blood. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the face in the dryer, its swollen eyes staring, its mouth stretched in a silent scream. The faint hum of the machines seemed to follow me into bed, vibrating through the walls of my apartment. Even though the basement was floors below, my heart jumped at every sound: the creak of pipes, the groan of the refrigerator, even the distant sound of a neighbor moving furniture above me. It all blended into the same mechanical rhythm, like the machines downstairs were alive and breathing in sync with my apartment. When morning finally came, I tried to pretend it was all just a bad dream. I stuffed the wet pile of clothes into a garbage bag, avoiding the scrap of stained fabric I had found mixed in with them. That piece felt like poison, as though just touching it again would make me sick. I shoved the bag into my closet, telling myself I'd deal with it later, but the smell clung to my hands no matter how much I scrubbed, an acrid mix of rust and something faintly rotten. The day passed slowly. I sat at work, distracted, staring blankly at my computer screen, my mind replaying every moment in that basement. I kept telling myself it wasn't real, that maybe exhaustion had warped my senses, but the image of that handprint inside the dryer glass stayed lodged in my head. No hallucination could leave something behind like that. When night fell again, dread settled in my stomach. I avoided the basement entirely, yet I still couldn't escape it. Around midnight, as I sat on the couch, I heard it again, a faint hum, muffled but distinct, like a washer cycling somewhere too close. I pressed my ear to the floor. Nothing. I checked the walls. Nothing. Yet the sound remained steady and rhythmic, vibrating faintly in my bones. I tried to drown it out with the television, turning the volume up higher and higher until the walls shook. But during a quiet moment between commercials, the hum pushed through again, louder now, as though it had moved closer. My skin prickled with cold sweat. I turned off the TV and held my breath. That's when I noticed the smell, a sharp, metallic tenth drifting through the apartment, faint but undeniable. My throat tightened, my stomach churned, and I realized it was the same smell that had filled the basement. I glanced toward the closet where I had hidden the garbage bag. My body didn't want to move, but my mind forced me forward. I opened the closet slowly. The smell hit me immediately, stronger now, burning the back of my throat. The bag lay exactly where I had left it, but something was wrong. Moisture seeped out from under it, staining the carpet. My heart sank. I crouched down and tugged the bag open with trembling hands. Inside, the clothes were still wet, though they should have dried by now. Worse, they looked different. Some had turned darker, their fabric heavy and slimy to the touch. My stomach twisted violently when I saw that same torn piece of stained fabric, only this time it wasn't alone. More scraps were there now, tangled with mine, shirts and pants I had never owned. They were old, faded, torn in strange places, some stiff as though dried with blood. I backed away, stumbling into the wall. The hum was louder now, as though it was coming from inside the apartment. I turned slowly, my chest heaving, and that's when I saw it, my laundry basket. It sat in the corner of the room, though I was certain I had left it empty. Now it was filled with damp clothes piled high, some spilling over the sides. Water dripped steadily from them, darkening the carpet beneath. I didn't move. I couldn't. The basket trembled slightly, the clothes inside shifting as though something moved beneath them. The hum grew into a low roar, vibrating the floor beneath my feet. My ears rang, my vision blurred, and I felt like I was standing inside the basement all over again. My knees gave out, and I collapsed to the floor, staring helplessly at the shifting pile of laundry. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the hum stopped. The room fell into silence, so complete it hurt. I gasped for air, clutching my chest. When I looked again, the basket was empty, bone dry. The carpet beneath it showed no sign of water. For a moment I almost convinced myself I had gone insane. But then I noticed the corner of fabric peeking out from under the basket. My hands shook as I reached for it, pulling it free. It was a shirt. Not mine, but familiar. The same one I had seen floating in the washer that first night. Only now, up close, I realized it wasn't just stained. The fabric was torn down the front, sliced clean through as though by something sharp. And on the inside, faint but undeniable, was the imprint of a hand, smeared in dried reddish-brown streaks. I dropped it instantly, but the shape stayed burned into my mind, a hand, reaching out from the fabric itself. I woke the next morning feeling as though I hadn't slept at all. My head throbbed, my chest felt heavy, and every sound in the apartment gnawed at my nerves. I tried to convince myself that what I had seen the night before wasn't real, that stress and exhaustion had twisted everything into hallucinations. But the shirt still lay crumpled on the floor where I had dropped it, torn and stained, its faint reddish streaks dried into the fibers. The handprint was still there. I couldn't ignore it. I stuffed the shirt into a plastic bag, tied it tightly, and shoved it into the trash chute. My hands shook as I pushed the metal flap shut, as though I feared the fabric might somehow crawl back out. I told myself that would be the end of it, that I had gotten rid of whatever cursed thing had followed me home. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that easy. All day I felt off, like the air around me was different. At work I kept catching a faint smell on my clothes. That same metallic tanks. My coworkers didn't notice. Or maybe they were too polite to say anything, but I felt their eyes linger when I walked past. I scrubbed my hands in the restroom until the skin turned raw, but the smell never fully left. That evening, I almost didn't want to return home. My stomach twisted as I climbed the stairs, each step heavier than the last. When I unlocked my door, the stale air inside seemed thicker than usual. I dropped my bag on the counter, trying to shake off the paranoia, but the silence pressed down on me like a weight. I wandered into my bedroom, forcing myself not to glance at the closet where the wet clothes had been. I told myself I'd just sleep, and in the morning everything would feel better. But as I pulled back the blanket, I froze. The sheets were damp, cold, clammy, soaked in patches like they had just come out of a washer. My skin prickled, and I staggered backward. The smell hit me instantly stronger now, pungent and metallic. I ripped the sheets off the bed, my breath shallow and erratic. As the blanket fell to the floor, I saw something tangled within the folds, another scrap of clothing, not mine. It was old and faded, a gray work shirt with buttons cracked and hanging loose. Dark stains ran down the fabric, crusted deep into the fibers. My stomach lurched when I noticed the collar was torn, as though it had been ripped by force. I dropped it instantly, backing toward the door, but the floor beneath my feet was damp too. My socks squelched slightly, soaked from patches of wet carpet. I glanced around, heart hammering. Water trailed in thin streaks across the floor, leading out of the bedroom and down the hallway. Every part of me screamed not to follow, but my body moved anyway. I stepped carefully, my eyes locked on the thin trail, glistening in the dim light. It led into the living room, where the sound of a faint hum made my chest seize. It wasn't the refrigerator this time. It was deeper, more rhythmic. The laundry basket sat in the center of the room. I hadn't touched it since the night before, but now it was filled again, heaped with damped clothing I didn't recognize. Socks, shirts, pants, all different sizes. None of them mine. Some were stiff with stains, others torn in odd places. Water dripped steadily from the pile, spreading into a dark puddle across the carpet. I wanted to run, but my legs felt weak, trapped in place by a sick fascination. I watched the basket tremble slightly, as though something beneath the clothes shifted. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the floorboards, rattling in my bones. I forced myself to look away, to break the spell, but when I turned my head toward the corner of the room, my blood froze. My bookshelf was gone. In its place stood a dryer. A large, old-fashioned machine with a circular glass door fogged over from the heat inside. Its drum turned slowly, lazily, the metal groaning with each rotation. I could see movement inside, clothes tumbling in a slow, endless spin, and something else, a shape caught in the fabric, pale and heavy, rolling forward before vanishing back into the darkness. My breath caught when the drum turned again, and the shape pressed briefly against the glass. An arm, thin, lifeless, tangled in the mess of damp clothing. I staggered backward, slamming into the wall, my pulse roaring in my ears. The hum grew louder, drowning out every other sound. The puddle beneath the basket spread toward my feet, soaking into the carpet, cold against my skin. And then, just for a moment, the dryer stopped spinning. The shape inside pressed harder against the glass, a distorted form barely visible through the condensation. Slowly, deliberately, a hand slid up and left a streak across the fogged window, 5 fingers dragging down as though marking me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All I could do was stare as the hum started again, deeper now, vibrating through my chest like a second heartbeat that wasn't mine. I didn't know how I made it through the night. I remember standing there, my back pressed to the wall, staring at the dryer that had replaced my bookshelf, listening to the hum vibrate through the room like it was alive. At some point, my body must have given in to exhaustion, because I woke up on the couch, drenched in sweat, the faint smell of rust still clinging to the air. The living room was normal again. My bookshelf stood where it had always been. The laundry basket was empty, tipped on its side, no puddles, no wet clothes. For a moment I thought maybe I had finally lost my mind, but the comfort didn't last long. As I sat up, my shirt clung damply to my skin. I stripped it off in panic and threw it to the floor. A spreading patch of moisture darkened the fabric, heavy and cold. It wasn't sweat. It was the same clammy wetness I'd felt in the sheets, the same dampness from the basement. And underneath it all, the faint metallic tang lingered. No matter what I did, the smell followed me. I tried to leave the apartment. I thought maybe if I just walked away, went anywhere else, the feeling would fade. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, but when I touched the knob, the metal burned icy cold against my palm. My breath hitched. Water dripped down the doorframe in thin streams, pooling against the floorboards. My chest tightened and I couldn't bring myself to open it. Somehow I already knew what would be waiting on the other side. I stumbled back, heart hammering, and that's when I heard it. A familiar sound, faint but unmistakable, the tumbling of a dryer, slow and steady. It wasn't coming from the basement this time. It was inside the apartment. My head turned toward the kitchen, and my vision blurred as I saw something that shouldn't have been possible. Where my refrigerator had been now stood a washer, an old, dented machine, its lid vibrating slightly as though something heavy shifted inside. The sound of water sloshed faintly within. I could feel the hum in my feet, crawling up through my bones. I backed away, but another sound rose behind me, a click, then a groaning whir. I turned and saw that my hallway closet door was ajar, glowing faintly from within. The hum spilled out, low and steady, the sound of machines that should not exist in my apartment. My legs shook, and I stumbled into the living room again. The laundry basket was back, only now it wasn't empty. Clothes spilled over the edges, dripping water onto the carpet in steady rivulets. They were all unfamiliar shirts, 2 large pants torn in places, socks stiff with stains. My breath grew ragged. The smell of rust and rot filled my lungs, choking me. I couldn't look away as the pile shifted. Something rose slowly from within the heap. At first, I thought it was just fabric rearranging itself, but then a pale hand slid out, fingers limp, dripping with water. My stomach lurched violently. The hand twitched, curling slightly before dropping again, lifeless but impossibly real. The hum deepened until it rattled my teeth, vibrating the walls, shaking the floor beneath me. I pressed my hands to my ears, but the sound was inside my head now, buzzing like static. My vision darkened at the edges, spots flickering across my sight. The hand disappeared back into the pile, but the clothes kept shifting as if something beneath them was struggling to rise. A shape pressed upward, almost forming a face before collapsing back down. The machines were everywhere now. I could hear them in every corner of the apartment, washers sloshing, dryers tumbling, doors slamming shut. The air was heavy with steam, droplets forming on the windows, trickling down the glass in red streaks that shouldn't have been there. My lungs felt wet, every breath thick and damp, as though I was drowning on dry land. I staggered backward toward my bedroom, desperate for escape, but when I looked inside, the bed was gone. In its place stood another washer, its lid wide open, waiting. Water inside swirled slowly, almost invitingly, the dark surface rippling as though something just beneath wanted me closer. I pressed my back to the wall, every muscle trembling, my mind screaming to wake up. But this was no dream. The machines had followed me. They were here, filling every space, replacing every corner of my life. My apartment was no longer mine, it was theirs. The hum grew unbearable, a roar of endless cycles, as though every machine in the world had joined together in chorus. My vision blurred with tears and sweat. I closed my eyes, wishing for silence, for anything but this. When I opened them again, the apartment was dark. Still, my furniture was back, my shelves, my bed, the machines were gone. Only silence remained. Relief rushed through me, but it was short-lived. From the corner of the room, I heard a faint drip. I turned my head slowly. My laundry basket sat there, empty and harmless, but a single shirt lay crumpled inside, soaked through, a dark handprint smeared across the fabric, as though something had pressed into it from the other side. The silence was worse than the noise, because I knew it meant only one thing. The machines weren't finished with me yet.